This episode is brought to you by Zencastr. Zencastr is the #1 tool for all podcasters. You can record high-fidelity audio between remote locations and get studio-quality sound. Go to Zencastr.com and use coupon code THATENTERTAINS for 20% off for 3 months or 20% off an annual plan.
This is a That's Entertainment podcast.
Awesome.
Just tell people they're awesome and mean it.
Awesome.
Awesome.
Did you have an awesome time? Did you drink awesome shooters and listen to awesome music and then just sit around and soak up each other's awesomeness?
Awesome. That was awesome. You guys are awesome.
No,
You're awesome.
no.
You are awesome.
Sir, you are awesome. Seriously.
Awesome. Awesome.
Everything is awesome.
Welcome to this week's edition of Everything is Awesome. I am your host, Kev, and this is the show where we sit down and talk to awesome people about awesome things. And man, oh man, what an episode we have for you this week, especially after last week's episode where we sat down and played Star-Crossed with Ben Wallace from the Pot of Love podcast. We were also joined by his co-host and wife, Mel Wallace. We also had Jeff Stormer himself swing by, and Blaine Martin from the Refugees of Esmeralda and Now You Are Not Alone podcast swing by. So what a way to kick off episode 150 and just kind of mark that milestone and just kind of continue on here. As I said last week when I was recording my intros or the outro or something, that we're nearing the mark where I hit the longest streak in my podcasting career. The number 167 sticks out, but there's also a good chance we made it to 175. As I said, I have to look to see where Happy Hour made it to. But regardless, that means we are anywhere from about 17 to 25 episodes off from me officially hitting my longest streak of podcasting, and I'm very, very excited about that. What you guys don't know is as of now, as I'm recording this intro right here, I have up to about episode 158 recorded and ready to go, and we're going to be hopefully quickly getting some other ones recorded to get us 100% caught up. So we're very closely nearing another milestone that I can celebrate personally, and it's also got me thinking about other things that we want to do for other milestones. And some cool ideas popped up for episode 200 or possibly 250, depending on how quickly we can make things come together. That's right. I'm saying quickly when we're almost a year away from the next milestone. But anyway, this week's episode is going to be a good one. Last week we sat down and we played Star-Crossed. This week I sit down and talk to the designer and creator of Star-Crossed, Alex Roberts. I am super excited that she came on the show. She agreed to be on the show. She's someone that I've wanted on the show for quite some time, actually. And I was always hesitant to approach and ask to be on the show because she's part of the One Shot Podcast Network. And I don't know, for some reason, I look at everyone involved with that community and that network on a whole nother level, playing field than I am. And I don't know. I have no explanation as why I fear asking anyone from there to be on the show. Because so far, 2 for 2 have said yes, and I think maybe I've nonchalantly thrown out some requests to other members of that network, past and present, and it was nothing official. So I mean, really 100% for official requests. And Alex Roberts was such a wonderful person to sit down and speak with. Of course, I don't have my show notes in front of me because I am a garbage person, but we sat down and we talked about podcasting, we talked about film, we talked about Star-Crossed, game design, her new game for the Queen, and so much more. She is a podcaster, game designer. You can hear her on the Backstory podcast, which is part of the One Shot Podcast Network. You can check out Starcrossed, the role-playing game, now available. You can buy it. You can go to bit.ly/StarcrossedRPG. Her new game, bit.ly for the Queen, is available. You can find her on Twitter at Muscular Pikachu. The origin of which is pinned right at the top of her profile, so you can find that out. And of course, you can just go to helloalexroberts.com to find everything she does. It's all right there on helloalexroberts.com. Without further ado, let's kick it off to this great interview I had with one Miss Alex Roberts right here on the That's Entertainment Podcast Network on thatentertains.com/network, and of course our homepage of homes, awesomepodcast.com. Yeah, I feel like that's just like I started doing it like so I've been podcasting for like since 2007, and the first like I guess 6 to 7 years of me podcasting was like really radio shock jock hack. Like
that's an aesthetic.
It is, but it's something that you can really only do in your like early to mid 20s, and maybe only can do like prior to 2000, and I want to say like, let's see, we're in 2018, so like probably prior to 2014, 2015.
Yeah.
Like yeah. I feel like now the podcasting landscape demands more. Mm-hmm. Plus, like even radio just kind of demands more when it comes to your talk show host. It's not. I don't know. It's a whole nother world. Like it's amazing what they got away with 10 to 15 years ago, and just not even like FCC wise. I just mean like in the public eye, like what was acceptable as like we're allowed to say these things, and like the fact that Stern was ever able to host a radio show in the 90s and early 2000s amazes me.
Yeah. I think Stern will be pretty confusing to future historians.
Well, but I don't listen to him at all. Like I when I first got Sirius back, I went to Sirius because of him, because back that was when he first went to Sirius was when I was a hack shock jock guy, right. And when he first went to Sirius, I got it for that reason, and then I left for a long time, and my parents got it for me I think last year for Christmas or something. And I've tuned in once, and like even him, like he's tame by his standards, but like so even he realizes that like in 2018 you can't be Howard Stern anymore.
Wow, which that's such a cool thing too, when like sort of edgy guys kind of get like a little bit older too. Like I remember reading this interview with Trent Reznor or something, and he was like, I realize that I make very different, music now than I did, and can't really do the 9 Inch Nails thing anymore. I feel like, I'm doing pretty okay these days, and I don't have as much to draw on. That particular well just kind of runs dry, hopefully, after you're like 35 or whatever.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, that's all part of growth and both you as an individual and society, it grows and it deems what's acceptable to the public eye. Mm-hmm. Or ear in this case. It's like the whole James Gunn situation, with everything that happened with him earlier this year, and him getting fired from Guardians of the Galaxy 3, and I get Disney's standpoint on it and whatnot, and I can understand when people might be upset about what he said, but to me, and everything that I know about him, which is very little admittedly, but it seems like he showed growth over the last 10 to 15 years. So while unforgivable, especially in today's eyes, I mean, no one was batting an eye to the things he was tweeting about 10 years ago. No one cared then.
And there's a couple of things going on there, right? Because like I don't think that the acceptability of something changes necessarily, but I think for one thing that shows this sort of like when you're working for the mouse, like they're not concerned about whether or not something you did was hurtful to anyone in particular. They're just concerned about like liability of this person divided by like
Yes.
interest of this person over like, like they're just doing the math, the cold hard math of
Mhm.
it. So like whether or not something is okay and whether or not something hurts people, like it changes. I don't know if we're necessarily on an upward trend there, but definitely once you start talking about who's going to be employable and whatever, then it's not even really a question of ethics at all at that point.
Yeah. Yeah. It's yeah, and I guess my point was like it's just like like to me he's a guy who showed growth, and I think again it's such a sticky situation because I've talked to people who like 100% agree that like what happened with him was in the right, and it's hard to defend that it wasn't like it's I don't know, it's such a sticky. I'm glad I'm not Disney. uh, I guess the money would be nice, but
Yeah, there's I definitely won't be. So that's, it's like it's that thing with like grant me the patience to change the things I can and something the other to the things I can't. Definitely do not have to
yeah,
worry about directing multi-million dollar film
yeah.
franchises. Not going to be one on my
No,
radar
no, no.
anytime
That's
soon.
no, no. I mean, I'd be happy with like a little $27,000 indie flick to kind of find the time
Yeah,
to do. I guess is
yeah.
the issue, and I had
Man,
the money, but
film is
yeah, time.
fun. That's something that like podcasting is cool because podcasting is doable, and I get to have these
Yes.
wonderful sort of darling little intimate conversations with people and do all of the other things that I love about backstory. But man, film is like a lot of fun though.
Yeah. So, have you dabbled in film at all?
I did like stuff for fun with some
Okay.
friends of mine when I lived in a different city. I knew some people who were just kind of into like short films and indie films
Gotcha.
there. And I used to work at a marketing agency, so I used to like get to hang out on video shoots and just kind of help out. And um, I don't know. It's one of those things that like you legitimately truly cannot do it on your own like
Yeah.
by any stretch. Like you just can't, no matter how much we want to like ascribe a certain film to a certain person. Like it's such a team effort that I don't know, it
Mhm.
results in kind of cool, interesting, creative dynamics.
No, yeah, and it's something that like, and not just film. I think just video work in general, like
Yeah.
when, and especially in 2018, when a film or just being a content creator spans so much in the video scheme of things. Like it just spans so many different mediums these days, and I still don't think there's a way unless you're doing maybe I guess a vlog. Aside from that, it's anything you do is some sort of team effort, and I mean it's the sole reason why I haven't done really anything in film because it's hard to, especially as an adult, to get that group of people together to do it when it's you're literally doing it for nothing. We did, God, probably I want to say 10. I think it was right. I think I was podcasting at the time, so it had to be less than 12 years ago. But in the like it was before 2010 or maybe around 2010 when we filmed this little silly short about 5 hour. We called it 5 hour zombie. So it was a knockoff of 5 hour energy drink.
Mm-hmm.
And that was just that silly skit that ends up being, I think, it clocks in under 5 minutes probably. That was like a one, 2, 3, 4. That was like a 5 to 7 person like crew to shoot.
Mm-hmm.
And there was only 2 people on screen at any given time.
Yeah, I remember probably one of the most fun. Yeah, I mean, yeah, I had so much fun. This is bringing back memories now. Just shooting this really, really like really silly, just kind of comedy short that was like 2 or 3 minutes long. But
Mhm.
and we shot it in one day. Like it might have
Yeah.
even just been like one evening, like kind of after work thing.
Mhm.
And it was like 5 of us. And I think the most kind of important salient job that I had on that shoot, because I wasn't writing or directing, but I did dump a can of pea soup on someone's face. And it was so much fun because it was like, we really only have this space for one night, and after that we would kind of get tired anyway. This
Yeah.
guy does not have a change of clothes. I need to nail this. Like, I need to really absolutely get this pea soup thing perfect. And yeah, there's something about like just that group of people, that amount of time, like I don't know, like respect to everybody who makes that their job because like it's actually such a bonkers amount of work
Yeah.
for what kind of comes out at the end that like I hope you're having fun. I hope you love it.
Yeah, and that's something that like I'm a huge Kevin Smith fan, and something that I really love about him and I have kind of always loved is that he's a guy who like if you ever notice any of his movies. Going back to, I'm almost positive Clerks, like it never says a Kevin Smith film. He does not include that in his credits. I mean, it will say directed by Kevin Smith, but he's a firm believer in what you mentioned. Is that a film takes an entire team, an entire crew to put together. It's not just a Kevin Smith film. It's a film of everybody on that film, from the catering to the actors, the directors, and the sound guys. They're all filmmakers. They're all there helping make the movie happen. So, and then just especially in his. I don't know what phase of his career you want to call it that he's in now, but very specifically his like TV directing that he shares a lot of. He just seems to have a lot of fun, and he to him that's like his job on a TV set because he's there for a week to direct, and then it's hands it off to other people. So like he just brings a whole different energy for the crew and the cast to like smile and laugh and whatnot. So. That's what if I ever get the opportunity to do a bigger video project, that's what I hope I can learn and bring to it is just like, it's not all about me and just bring fun to it.
Yeah, continuing to enjoy the process. I think like probably no matter what you're doing, and I know it's really easy to lose sight of that, especially when you start doing quote unquote creative things as your like job. It's really easy to think like, okay, take it now I have to take it seriously, which means less fun. But
Yeah.
I think that makes it a lot harder to make something that's going to resonate with people.
Yeah, it's I mean, and it's been a roller coaster. Like even podcasting, which is the as you know, probably the simplest form of content creation. I guess depending on the type of podcast that you're doing, but for the most part, this show, Everything is Awesome. It does not require a lot of brain power, and does not require. I mean, it does require a lot of time to edit because I do like to listen to the whole thing just to make sure there's no audio drift, especially in a remote interview like this. Yeah. But that's the killer is like I love this part, sitting down and talking and having interesting conversations. It's all the other parts that come with it, putting it together, getting it out there to the world, marketing it and tweeting about it and all that stuff is like not the fun part. And it's where and I'm not sure how it is on your end, but where I wish I kind of did have some sort of crew to help with that because most podcasters are usually a one person crew.
Yeah, definitely. And like, I think even if you are, I think like even if you're, two or three people, the same people who get together every week, that kind of gives you a leg up because I don't know, presumably they're like sharing editing duties and sharing the load and you don't have to do scheduling. Like scheduling is such a big thing. I I do a ton of research for my show just because of the nature of the guests that I have on. And that's I don't know if I can necessarily say I enjoy it. Sometimes I really do enjoy it. Sometimes you find out just the wild stuff where I get to read really cool academic papers and stuff. I am very, very lucky to have a very good editor, Alex Sisk. Just everybody get at me if you need to hire an editor. It's just like changed my life and helped me just kind of be able to keep doing the project, honestly, just with other stuff. But yeah, like I'm with you. Like I do this because I like talking to people. Like I just want the conversation. Everything else that has to happen around that is like, okay, that has to happen, I guess.
Yeah, and it's something that I've just literally as of today, like started to like really kind of consider passing editing duties off to someone else, uh, which means is another cost that I really don't need, but like seriously considering it, because it is like I look at the backlog because I'm behind, because the end of the year for me is like a train wreck year personally, just personal things, uh, with like anniversaries of people passing away and anniversaries of this and that, birthdays for those people that are no longer with us. So like the last 2 months of the year is usually like a bad headspace for me. So like, and I realize that, I recognize it, and that's like step one of figuring life out. And I think step two is like, it's maybe even if I just do it for the end of the year, like really considering bringing in help, paid help to get this stuff out there on a more timely manner, for sure. But you've mentioned backstory a little bit, and I do want to get to that. I want to get to a lot of things, hopefully in the next half hour, 45 minutes that we got left here. But I do want to I want to start like kind of the origin point, and I guess part of that is like where are you from?
That is a really hard question because
Oh my God.
Because I'm a base brat. My dad's in the military, so that means that my parents are from Newfoundland. I live in Canada. My parents are from Newfoundland, but they left just before I was born. So I was born in CFB Gagetown, and then we lived in Petawawa for a while, and then we lived in a couple of other places. I lived out east for a while. This is all very meaningful if you're an Eastern Canadian. And I actually just moved a couple of months ago to Victoria, Vancouver Island, BC. So that's been like a pretty huge life change. So yeah, that's where I'm at.
I love Canada, and I guess like I knew probably for some reason, like either in your Twitter profile or something, but you can definitely hear like in your I don't want to say accent because it's not really a Canadian accent, but like they're like in words like process or process, as you said, which I love. Like I like that might be my favorite word to hear a Canadian say. Like every single Canadian says it like in that, I guess, the proper way, like not in the hick Philly way. And like I don't know what it is, but the process, I just like I've heard Malcolm Ingram, who's like a documentarian from Canada. He like I've heard him talk on several podcasts, and he says it that way. And I just hearing you say like reminded me that you were from Canada. And I just, Canada is one of my favorite like places I've ever traveled to for both like for just fun and for work. Such a
Whereabouts
fun
have you
time.
been?
Not many places. I've been to Niagara Falls area for both work and pleasure. Toronto, mainly the Toronto area. I'm trying to think if I've gone any further west.
Man, I've spent a bunch of time in Toronto. I always enjoy it. That might be because I have very sort of sweet, wonderful people in Toronto, but it does usually end up being a pretty good time.
Yeah, it's a like super, and this is like almost, I don't think I've ever been in a town in Canada that doesn't look like super fancy and super clean. Like everything is like there was not one experience of me walking through like the bad parts of Philly or New York City, like when in any of the towns that I visited. And like I did a lot of East Coast. I don't think I went anywhere like Central or West Canada. I think it was all East. Like Halifax is probably the farthest east I went.
Oh yeah, okay. My dad lives in Halifax right now, so my sister and my brother too, actually, right now, and it's one of my favorite places. Like Halifax is wonderful. I just want to take everybody to Halifax. Isn't it just the prettiest, just friendliest, sweetest place?
I mean, I don't know that there's any place in Canada that's unfriendly, and I know that's like a big stereotype that you guys like you and every other Canadian are probably tired of hearing, but I don't know. Like, I don't know if is that true? Like, do you find that to be true? Is it a true stereotype as a Canadian that like you're all just super friendly?
Here, well, there's two things on that. One, I think it's all relative, right? Like
Yeah.
one of the things I love about Halifax and about Victoria is that they're so much friendlier than anywhere in Ontario. Like anyone
Mhm.
outside of Toronto, for example, will be like, "Oh, Toronto, like they're so mean and stuck up and like, you know." But the other thing is that uh, I think Americans have trouble identifying when Canadians are being mean. Um, because we do it a little bit differently, and it's like it's a little more passive. We're more passive aggressive kind of culture,
Okay.
I think, probably.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
at least like kind of white settler middle class Canadian culture.
Mhm.
So that's what I think is actually going on. I don't know if there is more goodness in our hearts, or if we just kind of um have learned to wield a certain kind of passive aggression.
One of my favorite things, and I swear I'll try to make this the last Kevin Smith reference, is on his main podcast, Smodcast. Is him and his co-host Scott Mosier. They'll read the Scan BC Twitter account and like just find the funniest like crimes going on in, I guess, British Columbia. And it's like
I'm Googling this right now because yes, please carry on. This is extremely intriguing to me.
I've checked it out a few times, and I guess you have to really, I mean, be like a film director that has all the time in the world to like look at it, because like every time I've glanced at it, it's just like, oh, this seems like normal stuff, but there are like, and they make a big bit out of the things that they bring up. It is, at least listening to them talk about that Twitter feed is one of the most fascinating things. And maybe now that I'm talking about it, I just need to spend some more than 5 minutes on it. Excuse me. But yeah, the crimes that they highlight, at least that come off that Scan BC, are just like, they are, to me, the most typical Canadian things. It's like people getting in trouble for like being too nice almost.
So I definitely I agree that probably like you need to go through many days of it in order to find crimes that aren't just sort of, you know, typical
Yeah.
criminal activity. However, I did happen to just look at this page right now and see from October 29th, RCMP have responded to the area of Goldstream and Whale for reports of a male walking around with a handgun. The suspect was located and found to be in possession of a power drill. So I think there's kind of three really key points there. One, the fact that just someone having a gun is considered utterly terrifying in this
Mhm.
country, and two, that it turned out to not be a gun,
Yeah.
and three, that the people who were talking about this didn't know the difference. So there's a lot there to really enjoy, I think.
um yeah. And it is like, yeah, because at first glance, like just listening to you say that, like it is kind of worrisome to hear, even as an American, that like someone's walking around with a gun, because, and maybe it's just because I don't come from like a huge gun family. Now my fiance and her family they're like a big gun family, so like guns have been in my life for the last 6 to 7 years now, but like before that, like I had never even touched a gun or fired a gun or anything like that, unless it was a toy gun. And so like for me, like the idea of and I think that's also a Pennsylvania thing, because our it's, I mean, you can open carry, but like in the northern states, at least, you'd probably be looked and frowned upon, and the police would be called on you if you just open carry, versus like somewhere like Texas, or, I mean, that's going to be who I point out because it just seems to be stereotypical Texas, but like you can open carry in a holster on your hip down there, and like that's just a Tuesday.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, we don't have to talk about this too much because it does get kind of sad at a certain point. But when I see signs, because I travel to the States a lot just for work,
Mhm.
and when I see signs that are like, you can't have a gun in this building, and there's like a sign that says no gun, or it'll be like a bank or something, it'll say, you can't have an openly borne firearm in this gun, or no concealed firearm in this building. That throws me off so much because it just seems like, oh, well, I agree with you, sign, but yeah, it's a strange
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah, it's. I mean, and obviously we have our own, cross country debate about what's going on with guns, and we will move on from that because this podcast should not ever be political because I know nothing. I'm ignorant. But so Canada, which is where you've you've lived there and have grown up there your entire life in the Great White North.
Yeah, that's right.
And so now I don't know if what you do for your day job is like actually what you would call you do. I mean, obviously it's what you do for a living, but what you're here for is, I guess, a couple things: podcaster, game designer, content creator. When it comes to those things, where's your origin point there? Like what? Let's start with, I feel like at least role-playing games or games in general is probably like the first thing, since podcasting is still kind of so new. But so where's your origin point when it comes to the game landscape and wanting to be a game designer? And then how does that lead to podcasting?
I mean, let me think about it. Like in terms of playing role-playing games, to me, I always got really excited by the idea of D&D. Like
Mm-hmm.
just for some reason was able to absorb that cultural concept and recreate it in play when I was a kid, a long time before I ever picked up a book or learned how to play um, Dungeons and Dragons, the actual game. And then in high school, I actually like played D&D. You know, it was 3.5 back then. So did that with some friends of mine and I have very, very fond memories, like I think a lot of people do. But they were more like, oh, I had fun with the people, but you know, the game was weirdly unsatisfying. And then tried to play a little bit more in university, play some fourth edition, and just never could get what I wanted out of the experience. You know, it never really matched up to what I found appealing about D&D. And I love telling this story. My friend Patrick, he and I went out for a beer. Um, what must be like close to 10 years ago now? No, I'm I don't accept that that could be true. But a couple of years ago now, and I said, Patrick, you know, I knew he was into RPGs, and I said, yeah, I've played D&D, you know, for a couple of times over a couple of years, and I thought that I liked RPGs, but you know, I've given it a bunch now, and I don't actually like it. Yeah, it turns out I don't actually like RPGs. I'm surprised, but there it is. And he was like, "So Alex, have you ever played anything besides D&D?" And and he was the sort of the first person to introduce me to at the time, I mean, he talked about Burning Wheel, and my mind
Mm-hmm.
exploded. He talked about Dread and about Fiasco and about Apocalypse World, My Life with Master, all of these other games that we then went on to play over the next couple of months, a couple of years actually. We had a really good gaming group for a while, so that's how I really got um, into the role playing games that I could actually get excited about and wanted to run and yeah, and so it kind of just was a big joyful part of my life for a while. I got into podcasting because another friend of mine wanted to start a podcast, and I was on a discussion show called the Tabletop Superhighway for a while, and we did that for a few years, and at some point, actually, I don't know if it was during or after that I was also encouraged by friends to start making games. So I'm actually
Okay.
realizing that every single time along my path, it's always been me not really sure that I can do something, and other people being very kind and encouraging, and then me ending
Mm-hmm.
up kind of doing it. Because uh, even Starcrossed, which I've been so happy with how it's turned out and how it's been received, and to help it along its way. That was a game that I was working with Steve and Jason at Bully Pulpit Games, not in a design capacity at all, just doing marketing and admin and some other work for them. And we had a couple of meetings where we talked about publishing a game that wasn't Jason's, right? Jason Morningstar is the chief designer there, and almost all of the games that they've published have been his. And they said, it's been a while since we published The Warren, which was by Marshall Miller. Said, it'd be really good to publish something else again, but it would have to be just the right fit, and it would have to be, with someone who we really trusted and could really get along with, and have to be a concept we're really excited about. And like we honestly had this conversation multiple times before I don't know, a light went off, and I said, "Oh, guys, yeah, I've been working on this game. Do you want to look at it? Are you interested in it at all?" Because I had been working on Starcrossed for a while at that point. Maybe a year. I have no idea. I'm so bad at the time. But yeah, I showed it to them, and they were interested in it and got excited, and we signed a contract very shortly afterwards. Actually, and that was like 2 years ago, maybe less than that. Oh my God, like a year ago. Man, that's bonkers.
Yeah, well, before I touch on Starcross because I do want to talk about that as well. I do like game design, and so for me, like my story with role playing games is. I guess kind of similar, but not. Like for the longest time, all I knew about was D&D, and back when I was in high school, like there was enough people and like I guess a cool teacher that and I guess really back then he was not a cool teacher because most kids, no one liked. We all got beat up for even saying D&D, but. We had like a group, like an after school group that got together to play, and something like it only met once. It went horrible. Like someone wasn't taking it seriously enough. So we all said we're not doing it. And when I say serious enough, I mean like, no, like they just weren't role playing. Like they just weren't. And I guess none of us really, at that time we were probably all like maybe 16 to 17 years old. So like, at least for me, like none of us really had experience with D&D or role-playing games, and it wasn't until about 3 years ago when I first started Everything Is Awesome, and so I was 31 when I started listening to what Jeff Stormer show Party One, and like that his show like jump started me into the tabletop role playing community big time because I learned about all these new like role playing games, and I kind of knew about like I knew that D&D as a podcast was a thing, but I didn't know that there was stuff beyond D&D literally until about 3 years ago. And still like I don't play very often. I'm more of like a consumer with podcasts, and then I'll play like. Yeah, I think I play mostly on podcasts, if I'm being honest. Like I played like 2 or 3 times on Jeff's show, and then just recently on my own show, we've played maybe like 2 other games before, but recently we played. As far as when people are listening to this, last week on episode 150, we played Starcross, and we'll get to that in a second, but. Also, like me getting into the role playing community is like for the better part of 2018. I don't know. I assume for all people that call themselves game designers, when they're sitting around wanting to design a game, I'm assuming like I now realize that it can't be easy because for the better part of a year, I've been trying to develop my own thing, and like. And I've been beating my head against the wall, like not being able to figure it out. And then finally found like, all right, I'll just do this instead. And like a light bulb went off and I'm in the process of writing everything. But is that what game design, like for you at least, is that what game design is like the most difficult thing in the world until a light bulb goes off?
I mean, I don't know. Like, I think it's more like a bunch of light bulbs, and then also in between all of the light bulbs, there's just like absolutely like incredibly difficult, like just rolling a stone up a hill kind of things. Like there was a lot of things that I had to bash my head against the wall and had to ignore for weeks at a time, and had to have I mean, have Steve and Jason do a lot of kind of editing with me and pushing me and asking me questions that helped me refine the text, especially towards the very end, right? Like, I think when
Mhm.
you're early in a design project, it's all ideas, it's all concepts. And so you can just throw something down on the table, see if it plays. If it doesn't, something else is kind of right in line, right behind it. And you can just kind of keep stuff going until you have a concept that's like, oh yeah, this mechanic, this idea, this dynamic, this rhythm, it works, it plays. I see it happening. I can kind of catch it. Um, but then the more that time goes on, it's been my experience that you make smaller and smaller changes as time goes on, and yet somehow the tinier changes just become like so much harder and like so much more grating to get right, because you go from changing, taking out pages of text to, trying to figure out, should it be this word or that word? Should it say and or or?
Mhm.
I don't know. We'll have to play it. We'll have to play the whole game with this, with as and then we'll have to play it as or, and then see what happens, and then make some really specific kind of judgments about which one was preferable and why. So it's sometimes it's the light bulb, and sometimes it's just the yeah, uh, um, the opposite
Is
of that.
now by the time you were like done, and maybe you're, I guess you're technically maybe not even done with Starcrossed yet, but by the time you were done, like the heavy stuff with Starcrossed and getting it to the point where it was funded and getting it to the point where the Kickstarter was done, had you been sick of it yet?
Um,
Because you spent so much time with it, and especially like playing it, I'm sure hundreds of times.
well, that's one nice thing. I can tell you, I've gotten sick of the text. Like, I definitely never want to read that book again. But I'm very, very lucky that I'm not sick of actually playing it yet. And I think part of that
Okay.
is that I I don't have to like run it for other people. It's not like a GM thing where I'm always the one GMing,
Yes.
because it's a two-player game. And so every time you play,
Mhm.
yes, you're engaging with the rules, but you're also like just very closely engaging with another human being. And you learn so
Mhm.
much about a person, and you get to see such a wonderful, sweet, honest kind of side of someone when you play Star-Crossed. And I mean, it's like you were and I were talking about earlier, like these conversations are why we do this kind of thing. And I think a lot of gaming for me is about connecting to people. And I can still connect with people when I play Star-Crossed. So for me, that still feels very special.
And this type of game, I've learned, and obviously from basically just listening to them, because that's what I do most of versus actually playing them, is like the conversational games. And maybe it's because I'm a big old, I love Kevin Smith movies that are all dialogue. I love sitting around talking for hours at a time on a podcast. So maybe that has something to do with it. But they seem to have like, even like they're the ones that attract me as like, oh, let me like check that as a game that I want to play, because they seem to be, even though like I think I'm a real bad like role player and improv person, they are the ones that intrigue me the most, because they just dice rolling is fun, and I do love those type of games, and I do love that style. But especially like when it comes to two-player games, it seems like the what makes the most sense is like having something that maybe prompts you to talk, but just acting for an hour or however long the game takes. And that's what, like, I mean, every game, and I hope that, and unfortunately, because I'm really bad at preparing, unlike when we talk about your podcast, I'll make the comparison more there. But I don't do much research and don't do much preparation for my podcast, so I wasn't able to get you our episode 150 ahead of time so that you could listen to it, so we could actually have a conversation about it. But the I hope that our playthrough, and it's not any, I'm not spoiling anything now because this is episode 151. Ben from Pot of Love was the guest for episode 150, and somehow we got on some tangent about Starcross, and like man, what if it was, and it was, I must have just seen the Venom movie.
Oh my God.
And I was like, oh my God, what if we do Venom and Eddie Brock? And I'll tell you what, on saying it and then actually sitting down to do it are two completely different concepts. Like, because, and I didn't really like, I didn't know the full rules, even though I've listened to Starcrossed like at least like 5 times, I guess. I've heard it on various shows up until sitting down and playing it with Ben. But like, I don't know, because I mentioned it to you ahead of time that we were going to do this. So I don't know if it clicked with you, the logistical nightmare of playing a character, like 2 characters who are literally always touching. And having to play that in a game where like that's a core mechanic of the game is describing intentional and unintentional touching with the characters. And we worked around it. I think we found a good way to work around it. We kind of pre-discussed all that stuff, which may have been recorded. I forget, but we found I think a good way to work around it. And I hope that when everyone listens to it, because I don't know the reaction yet, that I hope we did the game good because it was, again, going into it, I was like, I'm ready. And then sitting down to do it, like all of a sudden it's, I get nerves, not only about like doing the game right, but like actually sitting down to get into this weird Marvel Venom intimate headspace with another player.
Yeah. And I think it takes a lot of, it takes a lot of bravery, I think, to play almost any game. I mean, you're putting your ideas out there, even if it's not about love and romance and intimacy. You're putting yourself creatively out there. And so just like doing karaoke or an open mic night or whatever, like it takes guts to put yourself out there, and be open to the reactions of other people like that. On top of that, to do actual play, like I've done it and I will do it again. But it is really nerve-wracking for me, even when I'm playing my own games, where I'm like pretty sure I know the rules, relatively speaking. I still find it very, very nerve-wracking. Maybe just because it's not something I'm used to performing, and I have to be. I'm doing something that's very familiar, but in a way where I have to think about other people who are watching or aren't watching yet, but they will be. Or it's a different headspace.
And we were playing in the free play area of PAX Unplugged.
I saw the pictures. Oh my gosh.
And we thought it was a great idea to sit at the long tables that are shared by multiple groups. So like halfway through the play, I think Ben mentions, he's like, those tables that are behind you where like it's just a round table that only one group is sitting at? That would have been the smart place to sit, because like all these people are around us hitting the table and knocking and like I don't know what game these other, I don't know, I'm saying kids because everyone seems younger than me, but these kids or this other group of players that were to my left, they were playing something. It was a board game that involved building something, and they bumped into the table and their tower knocked down, and like out of the corner of my eye I saw it, so I like had this bad reaction, like my heart, like the same reaction that you have when you're playing Tumbling Towers, we'll call it, while you're playing, I haven't played Dread, but I imagine like when you're playing Dread, or definitely when you're playing Starcross, because I know that experience now, like all of a sudden I thought like the world ended. Yeah. Because like their tower fell. I was like, oh my God, our tower's next. Like, and it was such, and then like the people walking by saying, are you guys DJing Jenga right now? We're like, no. Like, having to take a break to like explain what we were doing and then get back in the heads. It was a really interesting concept that I guess it kind of started with like the idea of let's do it live. And I was trying to get a live show going like the weekend before PAX, and like getting a giant tumbling tower of blocks to do it on like in front of a bunch of people.
Oh, that would be so fun.
And then it birthed into what it was, which I think was ultimately like, for me, I think that was the best way to do it because I'm used to performing live as far as a podcast is concerned because I take this show live a lot. But I've once, episode 100, I believe, of Everything is Awesome was Mission Accomplished, Jeff's game.
Right.
And I packed that. That had the benefit of being not just me and one other person. And I packed it with a bunch of like local Philly improv comedians. So like, I stacked it so that people would have a good time. So to do Starcross or any 2-player game, I think, I don't know how Jeff does it when he does his show live, but to do any 2-player game, especially I think Starcross or a game like Starcross where it's just so intimate, to do that in front of like a live crowd that's there to see you do that specific thing, I don't know that I would be able to handle that like emotionally or like physically. Like I think I would have been in the corner crying.
It's I played it on Twitch for the one shot like Twitch. Like I played with James D'Amato and we had a ton of fun and we had people in the stream just going nuts about that tower and it was so satisfying to see their reactions, you know, to have everyone else kind of caught up in the anxiety of the tower with you. To do it like live in front of an audience, especially with like a big old tower, it would be incredibly nerve-wracking. And also I extremely want to do it like right now, please. It sounds so fun.
I this year for PAX Unplugged. So I know you weren't at PAX this year. Were you at PAX last year?
I was, yeah.
Okay. So I don't know what your experience at PAX last year was. For me, and this could be just me alone, I didn't have the greatest time at 2017 PAX. I thought there's just things that they should have and could have done better. And in good news is in 2018 they did. I had such a blast at this year's PAX. Like I don't know if it was because it felt like a 180 that it was a 10 out of 10 con for me. But I very specifically this year said I'm not gonna get, because I'm really kind of new in the whole gaming community as far as like I don't even want to say as a personality because I'm not really, but I 2019 I kind of am trying to get myself into like actual plays and I have some ideas that I want to try to start up that I already started like knowing that 2019 PAX, like I have like an actual panel that I want to do, but like really the main thing I want to do is probably Starcross live at PAX. So that is my 2019 like at least PAX U goal is to play Starcross live, or to facilitate it happening at the very least. Yeah. But yeah, I can, now that I've gotten it out of my system and because it's such a like when you started Starcross, I know some of the history was kind of like a dread hack at first, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It started with just I had played Dread. It was one of the first story games that I played. And I just had so much fun. I completely was in love with it. And I thought, I'm so excited for when someone makes the play set that is just people are into each other, right? Because what's more horrifying than that? Yeah. And then it was like literally years later that I was like, oh, I guess nobody's going to make that. Maybe I can. But then I couldn't really figure out a way to do that. So the project kind of just morphed wildly out of control and ended up being its own game. Yeah.
So I guess you always had the tumbling tower as the mechanic.
Yeah, that's the one thing that has always been consistent.
Yeah, and that's especially like I got it before playing it, but if you've never played Starcross, you may get it, but I don't think you actually get it until you play, because I understood how the tension was there because I've played that game without a role playing experience. I've played Tumbling Towers just to tumble the tower before, but to play it in such a way where like you're actually maybe the goal is to keep the tower standing as long as possible, or whatever your personal agenda is in the story you're telling. it's every time your hand is anywhere near that tower is just, it's such a, and I think we said it on the show on episode 150. It's such a great mechanic. Like, I don't, genius. It was like, the game feels like pure genius, and I'm so happy that you created it.
Thank you. I'm really glad that it's brought you a lot of joy.
Uh,
You talk about sort of caring about the tower or like being invested or having this kind of emotional connection to it, and I've experienced that as well, and I've seen it. Like I've seen how strong it is for people, and it comes from just that's what happens when there is a narrative attached to almost anything. We will
mm,
care about almost anything, and it will become a part of us if we can attach a narrative to it. Like right now, I'm taking a couple of courses at University of Victoria, and just got through exams. Feel pretty good about that, and so I had lots and lots of study sessions. And my honestly, the exam that I was most confident about, I did this sort of study trick that I learned from a gal in my class that you take like a set of information that you have to memorize, like say a sequence of actions or something, and you make a story about it. And so we would just come up with these like stupid nonsense narratives, that would be about a frog does this and an apple does that and whatever. Once upon a time, like we would just make up a story that had, these four things happen in it. And I swear to God, when it came time to sit down to the exam, it would be like, okay, these are just, the five, traits involved in, behavioral assessment or whatever. But I would think about this silly story and like it would just come so naturally compared to things that I just tried to memorize as pieces of information. So there really is something about narrative that helps us get and kind of forces us to get incredibly emotionally invested in things.
for sure. And that, I mean, I am, especially now, like in my mid 30s, like I've gotten way more emotional. I don't know if it's because I'm older. I don't know if it's because I'm a dad now. I don't know what it is, but that, like, I mean, I'm the guy who cried at the Muppet Story, when Kermit's giving his speech at the end of the rebooted, or I don't know if it was a reboot, but the newer Muppet movie from, I don't know, early 2012 ish. Yeah,
Oh,
because my
with
fiance
Jason
was,
Segel? Oh, that got
yeah.
some tears out of me. Yeah, yeah.
Okay, I'm not the only one. Thank God. We went to go see it in the theater. My fiance was pregnant with with our first child at the time, and she looked at me like, I'm the pregnant one, and you're crying during a Muppet movie, and I'm like, Kermit had a really good speech, and like it's and I don't know what it is. I think it's partially being a parent now. I think and I think definitely has to do with maybe being a more mature adult than I was 10 years ago. But yeah, stories. I feel the power of them way more now. Even in like dopey commercials, sometimes I'll see the power of the narrative that they're telling there and tear up and whatnot. And I get like I want to touch on two more things before I let you go here. And one of them it looks like it's the narrative storytelling seems to be, and I'm just guessing here, something that either is either your strong suit or something that you really like designing, because you're in the midst of designing another story narrative game, correct?
Yeah, that's right. For the Queen. Oh my gosh. I have been having a very, very good time with that game as well. And that is a game that is in many ways very, very different from StarCrossed. The it's a lot easier to jump in and out of. It's much easier to learn, easier to set up. It doesn't have that same one-on-one kind of intensity, and
Mm-hmm.
instead it's I think it capitalizes on the feeling of five people, 3 to 5 people sitting around. I mean, you can play with two people, it's a good time, but there's a feeling of everyone kind of sitting in a circle sharing a story together that feels very different um from the kind of like role play heavy story of Starcrossed. And the
Mm.
way it emerged was totally different. It's a game I literally just like woke up one morning before my alarm and wrote and have barely changed since.
Oh
Um,
wow.
and it's But like Starcrossed, it's just, I don't know, it's just a game about relationships and feelings and stuff that's too darn real for my life. And it's about how you feel about a queen.
Mm.
It's about a journey that you and the other characters are on with this queen, and you just absolutely hit the ground running. You don't know anything when you start about who this queen is, who you are, what your relationship is, and it's all world building. So you start and you pull a question from a shuffled up deck of questions and you answer it. And then you go on to the next person and they answer one, and the next person, and the next person. And you just keep answering questions. And what that does is catch what I think I actually really, really love about playing kind of these kinds of games, which is not necessarily a perfectly well crafted arc. Because I think we actually very, like, extraordinarily rarely have those, but rather like moments and relationships and characters. That's what you end up with at the end of a game of For the Queen is is just like, oh, there was this perfect moment when this happened or this was revealed or eh, this one little sort of detail came out that suddenly made five other details make sense. And I'm so in love with the magic of that. And the fact that you don't have to put a narrative arc onto the game hardly at all
Hmm.
because you give people an opportunity to answer details. They will fill in those gaps. Like like I said, narrative is powerful. People want to make
Hmm.
a story. They want to connect. They want to make patterns out of events. And you pretty much just have to give them the barest tools to do that. And it's going to be what they naturally want to do.
Yeah, when I guess I think you tweeted out the box art for it the other day, and
Yeah.
and that got me down the rabbit hole of looking at the game and pulling it up just a little bit more specifically today. And I'm pretty excited about it because again, it's and I don't know what it is. Maybe it's because I'm a dialogue guy and I like a good story, but these games that use whatever their mechanics are to basically prompt you to tell the story. I guess they're just good, not like no setup games. Those ones have been like they've intrigued me the most lately, and I don't know why. But they're the ones that like I'm like, oh, I got to put that on my playlist. I got to go get the game as soon as it comes out, and sit down and play it as soon as I can. Like, and I can't tell you how much like PAX Unplugged did for me to like say I need like why haven't we had a game night in like over a year with like my group of friends and just bring all these games and like let's play, let's just before we get into a heavy campaign, let's just have like some fun one shots or some emotional one shots and just like let's get it all out and then like get back in gaming on a regular basis because it's I don't know it's something that I miss. And games like Starcross and I assume games like For the Queen, when I get a chance to sit down to play it, they're gonna speak to me and make me want to play more.
Well, thank you. That's very kind. And I think if you're enjoying Starcrossed, I think you will also definitely enjoy For the Queen. I think you will. I don't know. I'm curious to see if people see some interesting kind of thread between them or not.
I mean, I don't know if I'll be able to tell the same Venom Eddie Brock love story for the Queen, but you know, I'm sure it'll be a close second narrative that I'll like a story that I'll like.
Same universe, maybe. I'll
I,
I'll be curious about that. That's one thing is that I was actually surprised for some reason the first time that I heard Starcrossed used to tell fan fiction. It was a very, very good Obi-Wan Anakin story. And
ooh.
yeah, spicy. But you know what? I haven't heard any For the Queen fan fiction stories yet. So still waiting on that.
Mm,
I'm sure the internet will provide if it's good for one thing,
yes.
right?
Yes, yes, of course. It's because to me, like, and I think it's because like I also unfortunately spent some time in like the fandom world when it comes to like Once Upon a Time, because I was producing a show for that, a podcast for that show, and like to me, it almost makes the most sense that Starcross would be used exclusively for fan fiction, almost, because I mean I can't imagine. There's in fact, if anyone that still ever listened to the Once Upon a Time show that I produced, like if you want to tell your Swan Queen story, use Starcross to do it because you'll have a good story out of it. I assure you.
Still waiting on just a good old fashioned Spock and Kirk too. You know, like just hit me, Spurk. I know you folks are out there.
God, I mean, it's not me because I know very little about Star Trek, but you know what? That didn't stop because it turns out when Ben and I sat down like to do the Venom story, we were both like, so what's like, let's talk about like the backstory here and the canon of Venom. I'm like, well, I think we're gonna have to create our own because really, like, I don't really know like this. I like comic books, but I'll be damned if I ever read a Venom one. So like we used like parts of the comics canon that I knew, parts of the movie canon, and then I said we're just gonna create our own canon here. And if any Marvel people get upset with me, sorry, it is what it is at this point. Yeah. But it is a lot of fun, and I can see like I've really enjoyed like the unique stories that Starcross has told throughout. I think pretty much every other actual play that's been done on a podcast. I think they were all like original characters versus fan fiction like we're doing here. It's again I can't speak enough good words about Starcrossed, and especially after playing. Like I loved the idea of it, but. And I think that you need to actually play it to really understand how powerful it is, because I didn't realize how connected I would be to that alien symbiote love story until I played it. Like it started off, if I'm being honest, it started off as like a gimmick, like, oh, this is gonna be a fun gimmick, but it turned into like, oh my God, like I can't believe this is happening. And it's all because of that mechanic, I think, of the or at least the mechanic lending the tension to the narrative.
Mm-hmm. Well, again, like I'm so happy when I know that people are having a good time with it. And like I said, like the further along you get in a design, and this thing's still not completely out the door, right? We're still it's literally on a slow boat from China right now.
Okay.
And still needs to get out to distributors and stuff. So it'll be publicly available in January.
Nice.
And so what I mean is just that it's so encouraging to hear from people who are having a good time with the game, who have enjoyed reading it or playing with it or listening to actual plays or like anything. Like any kind of just positive stuff that I've heard from people, it is genuinely very, very meaningful to me and is very encouraging for getting this thing out the door and moving on to the next thing too.
Well, like I said, hopefully the dopey Venom Eddie Brock love story does the game justice, and I hope you enjoy it when you get a chance to listen to it. And I can't wait to play maybe like even a more unique story with it myself. But certainly one of my next highlights will be trying to put together a live version of that actual play, because I think that's I think it's a game that especially if you use like a giant tumbling tower, I think it's a game that would work really well with a crowd of people.
For sure. Yeah, you let me know if that's happening, because would be very excited about that.
Oh, it's I'm going to try to make it. Hopefully, if you have plans to come out to PAX 2019, and because that's where I would like to do it, or at least around then. I think it makes the most sense to do it then. But before I let you go, I know we're right about at our hour. I do want to actually talk a little bit more about backstory. We touched on you podcasting and kind of how you got into it. But for those listening that may not know what backstory is, can you tell us a little bit about backstory?
Yeah, Backstory is an interview show where I sit down with game designers, but also community organizers, scholars in the field of role playing studies, anyone who's doing interesting work in role playing games. And we just talk about their work, their projects, their ideas, what they're up to, and just kind of what they've been playing. Uh, I try to find interesting people,
Mhm.
and in particular, people uh, who are kind of coming up and doing new things. And I like to think of it as like a cutting edge show, although I've certainly had some folks who have been around role playing for a very long time. My first interview was with Jason Morningstar, who's kind
Mhm.
enough to come on, and I had Lizzie Stark on right after. She's a famous reporter and LARP writer in the world of live action games. So yeah, just anyone doing interesting stuff in tabletop or LARP, um, I am interested in talking to them. And we have a very, I've been told, Ross Kalman called it intimidatingly well researched interviews, and that tend to be just kind of cozy and intimate and as interesting as I can darn well make them.
I mean, see, I appreciate like coming from the interview world at least, or I don't like to call this an interview show because I'm actually an awful interviewer. I'm just really good at conversation, and it's actually I don't know if I use that as my excuse to not do any research, but it's the reason I don't do any research is because when I first started podcasting in 2007, doing the 2 hour kind of radio gimmick show where we would do bits and we would do segments and we would have interviews that were supposed to be traditional interviews. For me, if I had research in front of me, I'd have like 10 questions and just read down my 10 questions and not interact with my guest. And it's something that I've thankfully, the one thing I've learned in all of my time podcasting is that I can hold a conversation, and that's what I'm my best. So I like to think of this as a long form conversational show versus interview show that hopefully has an interview hidden somewhere in there. But that I can't. I respect. Like I love a lot. I listen to a lot of shows that are like this and are like backstory. They're just interview shows. And I can tell they all do research. They're all better people than me, yourself included, because you do all that research and all that. I can only imagine the amount of time that is spent researching, because I know what it's like to do this show without that research. And it does take some time. It's not nearly as much because it's usually just sitting here talking and doing the editing and maybe doing a little bit of research by the nature of of our conversations today, because I played Starcross, because I happened to see the box art for the Queen and went down that rabbit hole, and just because I'm a fan of the One Shot Podcast Network, I naturally just kind of had that natural research built in that I've done, however long we've been talking, maybe even longer than that from just listening to the whole network over there. So, but aside from that, like a lot of times I go in cold turkey, like literally not even knowing the person's last name. So lucky for you, Alex Roberts, I do know your last name.
That's very flattering. I will say there's a very good short series of interviews called The Turnaround that I listened to a few years ago. That is, it's Jesse Thorne, who I think is from the Maximum Fun podcast network, interviewing a bunch of famous interviewers, and it's like one of the best podcast projects I've ever listened to. Not because I think Jesse Thorne is an amazing interviewer necessarily, but because the people that he talks to, which range from like Walter Matthau, Katie Couric to like Jerry Springer. The Jerry Springer episode is actually my favorite.
Oh, wow.
Like just super, super interesting people. And all have such different like theories and like reasons for what like how they do their kind of thing and how they approach it, and with what attitude. And one thing that came up is that Terry Gross, for example, huge inspiration to me. She has a whole team of people who will do her research for her and then present her with like summarized information that she will then bring forward into the conversation. But there is also there was someone on there who I can't believe I forget his name now, but this is um this is like a famous interviewer. You'll just
Mhm.
trust me on that. And he
I
said,
just don't know his name.
um, might have been Larry King. And he said, I I don't want to know everything there is to know about my guest because I want to be in the role of my audience. He was
Mm.
like, I want to have the same question. I want to ask what my audience is wondering, and I want to be having the same reactions that they would, and be curious about what they're curious about, rather than making big assumptions about something only my guest and I are going to understand. So I think there's a lot of value in like not making assumptions and not
Mhm.
kind of giving yourself a bunch of preloaded concepts that you want to address, and instead just going in with that like genuine curiosity about the other person.
Well, thank you for calling me the next Larry King. That's
I
what I
think
heard.
definitely is the yeah.
And I actually a lot of times what I'll do at least internally is like Craig Ferguson is another interviewer who, to my knowledge, from just like listening to like what other people have said, he's a guy who like when they do the pre-interview, he just ignores it all, or he doesn't like they talk about nothing, and just have like a genuine conversation about like the weather or something, and then he goes out there and does not anymore, but when he had his show, he would just go out there and talk and have a genuine conversation, and there was something validating about that when I first started doing this show, like knowing that, and I didn't know that about Larry King. And that's, again, another thing that kind of makes me feel a little bit more professional, I guess, is that there's actual, people who make their career out of this doing something similar to me, definitely with a lot more professionalism behind it. But yeah, that is, I do appreciate, because even though what I think all the people I listen to have in common is that they do research in some fashion. They all have a unique show. And oftentimes I find myself trapped in the like, man, I wish I did my show a little bit like this. Like I was thinking about that today, listening to, I've recently become like a fan and inspired by Michael Rosenbaum with his podcast, Inside of You. And just the way I can tell that he's researched, but the way he's so natural about the conversation, I fell into the trap of like, I wish I was like Michael Rosenbaum. And then I realized that like, it's better just to be me because it's only I can have the conversation, hopefully, that I had today with Alex Roberts. Hopefully there was new information put out there, or at least, I don't know, I enjoy just sitting around talking. So that hopefully my audience feels the same way. Even though I talk about usually Kevin Smith and wrestling and Batman in every episode, you only got one of those today, guys. So be happy with that.
I think like ultimately you have to have a genuinely interesting interaction with the person. Like the person can be as interesting, and you can get as much interesting like information, extracted from them. But like it's I can tell you for sure that one of the things about doing an interview that ensures to me the best interview at the end of the day is if I have spoken to the person already at a con. And I pretty much don't do interviews at cons anymore because I would rather spend that hour having a handful of like short conversations with a bunch of new people who I haven't met before, and then I'll talk to them, online later and record remotely, because just getting a feel for how someone talks and what our dynamic is like, not even as a vetting process, like just as a bit of a warm up to like, oh, cool, we can like engage. And like to me that just gives us such a head start in a convo. So I think that yeah, just the dynamic, the banter is really important.
For sure. Like that's something that I'm so lucky that in 151 plus episodes with various specials that I've done. And I guess not all of them have been interviewed because we have done some actual plays and whatnot, and various other shenanigans. I've been very lucky that I think I can only think of like one or two interviews where like it was just really hard to get through the hour, and probably was cut short because of that, because the other person was not able to like converse with me, and I can. Most people, I think there's been a good split in this conversation, but people know that listen to this show know that I can talk for 95% of the time if need be, but I still need the other person to give me something. And I'm very lucky. I'm going to knock on wood. I'm very lucky that out of all the episodes I've done of Everything Is Awesome, I have not really had like a bad interview. At least not more than once or twice. And I think that's such a good record, considering I'm the guy who like is a shitty interviewer.
Well, we also talked when we were talking about video, like what actually matters at the end of the day is that you enjoy the process. None of us are making the big bucks doing this stuff. and even if we were, I think it would still be so important that we are actually enjoying it and actually having some fun with it. So yeah, let's keep having fun.
All right, Alex Roberts, thank you for spending the last hour or so with me. Thank you for working through the scheduling and whatnot. It was a genuine pleasure to sit down and chat with you, and I hope you come back on the show sometime.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for having me. This was really, really lovely, and yeah, absolutely. We'll talk some other time.
And before we let you go, just let everyone know where they can find you and your work on the interwebs.
Absolutely. The best place to go is helloalexroberts.com. I post links to all my work there. You can find the podcast and my Twitter and all that stuff through there. If you do want to go to oneshotpodcast.com, that's the place to find the podcast also. And if you're interested in Starcrossed, you can go to bit.ly/StarcrossedRPG. If you're interested in For the Queen, I have bit.ly/ForTheQueen, and that will take you to the Bully Pulpit Games and the Evil Hat Productions websites, respectively, to learn more about those games.
All right, there you go. And if you are driving in the car or whatever, the links will be in the show notes so that you can look it up later at your desk. Alex, thank you once again for being on the show.
Well, thanks so much.
Thank you once again to Alex for being on the show. What a wonderful person to sit down and speak with. I can't wait to pick up a copy of Starcrossed for myself to have in my own personal library. It's going to look beautiful with all the other games that I have, and I can't wait for the her new game For the Queen. It looks like as of now, as I'm recording, there's some activity moving on that as well. Be sure to check out helloalexroberts.com for more details on everything Alex has going on with Starcrossed, with For the Queen, and everything else she may or may not be working on. And of course, Backstory podcast can be found on the One Shot Podcast Network, available on several podcatchers like iTunes or Apple Podcasts, whatever they call it, Google Play, and several others. Thank you all for sitting down and listening to this Dopey podcast. Everything Is Awesome means the world to me, and it means the world to me that you are taking time out of your day to listen to this show. You could be doing anything with your time, and you're choosing to spend an hour or so with me and my guest each and every week, and I appreciate that and whatnot. I actually have to. I'm gonna be changing the pre-recorded stuff I have on the very back end of this show, because we've changed some links as the time of this recording is happening, even though maybe during the time that I did the interviews they were actually something else. But so I don't know how the end of this show is going to shake out after I cut me off, but if you're looking for ways to support this show, the best way you can do that is to support me. And you can, if you go to twitter.com /thatnerdykev, @thatnerdykev on twitter.com. Right now I have pinned to my profile page like just some helpful links that are about me and the things I do. And some of those links are ways that you can support me. You can support me by buying a coffee at coffee.com /thatnerdykev. You can support me $3 at a time if you wish. You can go to patreon.com /thatnerdykev. That's the big one. We changed the Patreon from a network Patreon to just one from me. And I feel like it's going to be easier to manage that way. I don't necessarily have to rely on other shows and other people to create content. And anything that I'm working on as an on-air personality or even in an editing capacity, that one's a little trickier. But at least as an on-air personality, I usually have the ability to share with you guys for early access on patreon.com/thatnerdykev. So if you would love to support me and everything I do, the best place to do that is on our Patreon, patreon.com/thatnerdykev. It is basically a subscription service where you can subscribe to the things that I do, which we're gearing up. Mike and I are actually meeting this weekend to talk about all the videos we have planned. We're going to start recording videos. We're going to hopefully start releasing in mid-March some original sketches and skits and stuff like that. Gearing up for like a much better, bigger kind of layout that we have for the summer if things go our way. We also are going to be doing more podcasting and whatnot, and all that stuff is going to drop first through the Patreon here on patreon.com/thatnerdykev. So if you want early access to all of that, the best way to support us is there on the patreon.com/thatnerdykev, and all the funds we raise through that go right back into everything that I do. Maybe one day I'll collect a paycheck for doing this kind of stuff. But right now, the number one concern is covering costs, covering hosting fees. And then beyond that way we're at least breaking even. And then beyond that, it's hiring an editor to help to alleviate my plate and help me with other projects that I want to work on and whatnot. That way I don't have to spend so much time editing my podcast or these other podcasts that I have planned to start. And I want to do that. I want to pay people to just enhance everything I work on, whether it be game design, whether it be podcasting, whether it be video work and stuff like that. I really, really would love to enhance that. I mean, we have our ultimate goal is to kind of get everything officially on books versus going through me and whatnot. And I would love to hit, I think it's like $400 or $500 a month to cover the cost of us going official, going legit as a legitimate company, because that involves a lot of things with state filing, trademarks and stuff, and a lot of other boring legal stuff that I would have to do in order to make everything legit and make this really not a full-time job, but make it something that is a sustainable thing and has potential for growth in the future. And that all comes from you guys. So if you can support us on a monthly basis with patreon.com/thatnerdykev, that'd be great. If not, you can always buy me a coffee at kofi.com/thatnerdykev. And of course, the biggest thing you guys can do is leave a 5-star rating and review on iTunes for Everything is Awesome. Just search for Everything is Awesome. Make sure you select the yellow background podcast. The other one with Taco Cats is our good friends on the West Coast that do a podcast called Everything is Awesome with Casey and Jeff and Casey. I don't know who goes first. I forget who takes the lead. We're the other one. We're the Everything is Awesome podcast. So if you could leave a 5-star rating and review, that'd be great. We haven't had a new rating in quite some time, so please leave one. And if I find it, I'll read it right here on air. There's so much more that I want to talk about, but we've taken so much of your time. So thank you all so much for listening to the show and for supporting us for all these episodes and whatnot. And we'll be back next week with some more exciting podcasts right here on the That's Entertainment Podcast Network on thatentertains.com/network. And of course, on our homepage, awesomepodcast.com. We'll see you next time, folks. We like to end Everything is Awesome with a call to action. Super friends, there are a lot of terrible things happening right now. It can feel like you can't do anything to help, but you can. It takes people like us to make a difference. One of the easiest and most effective ways to action is to call your representatives about issues that are important to you. Issues like Trump's national emergency declaration. A couple weeks ago, President Trump, declared a state of emergency on the U.S. southern border and redirected over $6.5 billion to construct a wall that's 234 miles long. He's diverted these funds from money that was appropriated by Congress for military construction, Pentagon drug prevention, and another Treasury Department drug forfeiture fund. This is insane that he has basically abused his power as president to bypass Congress to fund his pet project. There's a reason that this wall has not been built yet. There's a reason he can't get Mexico to pay for this wall. And the fact that he is abusing his power to get this money. He shut down the government for the longest shutdown in U.S. history. Congress struck a bipartisan deal just days before declaring a national emergency that included just under $1.5 billion for his wall, which is not what he wanted for it. He wanted 5.7. Somehow he got 6.6 with this national emergency. And because he did not get the money he wanted, he's declared a national emergency, ignoring constitutional standing and harming so much harm for diverting these funds. We need you guys, myself included, to let Congress know that this act is unreasonable. No matter what party you're part of, unreasonable. This power grab by Trump is inexcusable and must be met with sharp resistance and repercussions. Call your representatives. Write your representatives. However it is you want to do it. Let's let everyone know that we do not agree with this national emergency that Trump has declared. When I call my reps, I use a site called 5calls.org. That's the number 5calls.org. There, you'll find issue summaries for issues that are important to you, contact information for your representatives, and a script to read while you're on the phone to make sure your message gets across. Calling is quick, easy, and is one of the most effective ways to have your voice heard. Thank you to all of our supporters on patreon.com/thatentertains. Without their support, we wouldn't be able to bring this episode to you. If you want to support us in a non-monetary way, word-of-mouth recommendations and 5-star rating reviews on iTunes are the best way to spread the good word of awesome. You can find us on Facebook.com and Twitter @RealAwesomePod or @AwesomePodcast on Instagram. And we're available on AwesomePodcast.com and ThatEntertains.com/network. Get news about everything is awesome from our website, social media accounts, and also on my personal Twitter @ThatNerdyKev. If you're interested in ad rates, live appearances, help with your podcast, or have a question or comment, email us at awesome@crudeHumorstudios.com. Everything is Awesome is a production of That's Entertainment Podcast Network in association with Crude Humor Studios. Crude Humor Studios is a Philadelphia-based production company specializing in audio, video, and live performances. You can find more info at crudehumorstudios.com. Thanks for listening, super friends. We've been awesome.
That's Entertainment Podcast Network. Entertainment and culture. Artist-owned, fan-supported.